Did you often feel unheard by your parents as a child? Did your parents make all the conversations about them and rarely acknowledged your feelings? Did they brag about your achievements to others but never validated you emotionally? Did they exhibit selfish and harsh behavior in front of you but were very well liked by others? If yes, then chances are you were raised by narcissistic parents. This podcast will help you learn more about it. Hello, and welcome to the podcast Growing Up with Narcissistic Parents. I am a counselor with Dr. Prerna Kohli, a clinical psychologist and the founder of MindTribe. At MindTribe, we provide affordable counseling, support groups, communities, workshops, and e-learning for improving your mental health. A narcissistic parent is one who is self-centered, self-absorbed, and has an exaggerated sense of their authority. They frequently overlook the wants and worries of others, especially their children, since they think their needs and emotions come foremost. In certain extreme circumstances, they may have a narcissistic personality disorder, also known as NPD. You might be able to spot a narcissistic friend, partner, or coworker by their persistent expression of self-importance or sole attention on themselves. However, it might not be as clear if you had a narcissistic parent as a child. Given that a parent's responsibility is to discipline their children, it may be easy to confuse normal parental criticism with the aggressive critique that originates from narcissism. However, identifying the indicators that you might have had a narcissistic parent as a child can help you better understand why you behave the way you do, develop self-compassion, and create more stable relationships in the future. Let me brief you about narcissism before we go on with the podcast. Narcissism is extreme self-centeredness that causes a person to disregard the needs of those around them. Even if everyone occasionally engages in this kind of behavior, actual narcissists routinely neglect other people or their emotions. They are also unaware of the impact of their actions on other people. It's critical to remember that while narcissism is a trait, it can also be a component of a more serious personality disorder. Due to the fact that narcissism is a spectrum, not all narcissists have narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. People who have this disorder fall on the highest end of the scale. However, other individuals with narcissistic features may be found on the lower end of the spectrum. You might have seen in your day-to-day life that narcissists are frequently charming and captivating individuals. They don't behave irrationally straight away, especially in their relationships. Even if these interactions are only fleeting, they develop connections with people who reinforce their ego. The core of narcissism is the demand for constant appreciation. Therefore, narcissistic people who tend to become parents fail to recognize their child's emotions as deserving of their attention or as having value beyond being a channel for their own validation. If you have ever grown up in a setting like this, you may be aware that the parent expects their child to support their ever-growing sense of self-interest and self-worth. They might ask their child to provide for them directly or push them to succeed in highly visible ways so that the parent can then take credit for their accomplishment in parenting them. These habits are typically the result of deep-seated insecurities. They lack confidence in their sense of self and rely on other people, especially their children, to provide them with that security. Parental narcissism usually manifests into typical patterns, the grandiose pattern and the vulnerable pattern. While the former represents parents as brash, full of themselves, and always in need to be the center of attention, the latter, in contrast, includes parents who appear to be fragile, depressed, anxious, or needy. There are some common traits that you can spot in narcissistic parents, most of which include blaming their children for their unhappiness and engaging in manipulative behaviors. They might guilt-trip their child by saying, "I have done everything for you and you are so ungrateful," by shaming them that your poor performance is an embarrassment to the family, doing negative comparisons between siblings and others like "how come you're not as good as your brother," and other manipulative punishments such as, if you do not pursue this college major, I will cut off my support. If you had narcissistic parents as a child, you may exhibit certain behavioral traits in yourself, such as a tendency for people pleasing and a persistent need to take care of others. If you're not careful about your patterns, you might decide to date or even marry a narcissist because of the familiarity with playing the role of taking care of another person due to the experience of trying to please a demanding parent. You might regularly doubt yourself and your reality because, as a child, your parents never gave credence to your emotions and dismissed your idea of reality. Let's say you were upset because your sibling knocked over the block tower you just built. Your parents might have said, "Your brother would never do that. You must have knocked it over yourself." These kinds of incidents diminish the sense of self that you bring into adulthood. Young children of narcissists grow up to feel that their value is closely linked to how much they can gratify others. Therefore, as adults, they are always on the hunt for external validation. The inclination to downplay your feelings and emotions is perhaps one of the most obvious indicators that you had a narcissistic parent as a child. If you frequently had your feelings disregarded in your childhood, thus it is reasonable to say that you would start to think of your own needs to be trivial and unimportant. You may struggle to express your emotions or even know how you feel because you were never given the chance to do so while you were a youngster. Even for grown children, interacting with a narcissistic parent can be extremely demanding. It's critical to practice self-care to guard yourself against falling victim to the psychological abuse that narcissistic parents continue to inflict long after their children have grown up. One approach to dealing with them is to modify your response to them rather than attempting to change their behavior. Expecting them to apologize is typically a pointless effort. Such efforts are probably only going to result in more suffering and frustration. Setting boundaries is another option. Although it is really important, it is not always possible to cut your parents off entirely. You must establish your limits and convey them clearly and consistently if they must continue to be in contact. You must take a stand when the narcissistic parent passes a certain limit. You must carry through to convey to the parent that your limits are non-negotiable. Please keep in mind that this podcast merely scratches the surface of what can occur to someone who was raised by a parent who exhibited narcissistic traits. Any kind of abuse recovery involves a process that could last a lifetime. Take slow, gentle baby steps and give yourself the blessings of time, kindness, and patience. Don't hurry the procedure. Learn to appreciate each day for what it is while being aware of your experiences and what you are learning. As I wind up this podcast, I would like to say that parents who seem to be offering their kids something by immersing themselves in their children's interests, activities, and accomplishments are often taking more than they are giving. The accomplishments of their children are a source of ego nourishment for narcissistic parents. They look for methods to continue living through their child, even though the process is largely unconscious. Usually, the person who is under the pressure of their parents experiences the consequences that come with it later in life. In that case, you can try to get support from your extended family and friends with whom you can confide. If you feel that these emotions are becoming too overwhelming for you, you can always seek professional help. At MindTribe, we provide affordable one-on-one counseling sessions to help you lead a better life.